This episode is sponsored by the Bridge to Recovery, a nonprofit program on 115 acres near Bowling Green, Kentucky, a tranquil place where they've been changing lives for over 40 years. Their people improve their quality of life by acknowledging past emotional wounds and healing from all forms of trauma. The CEO, Paul Hamlin, has been a friend of mine for 20 years. Call him directly at 858-945-7848. That's 858-945-7848. Or you can learn more about the Bridge to Recovery by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting thebridgetorecovery.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
Hi, I'm Olga Rocha, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
Welcome to The Path to Authenticity. Happy New Year. Thanks for listening. I'm Tom Gentry. This is the first episode of 2020, and it features Olga Rocha, PhD. Olga is a licensed mental health counselor, a certified rehabilitation counselor, and a certified forensic mental health evaluator. So she specializes, among other things, in vocational assessment services, job development, and job placement services. So I thought it'd be a great way to start off the year by talking to someone who makes a living helping others find their professional path. You can find out more about Olga by visiting vitavoc.com. That's VIDAVOC.com, or through the links in the show notes. So here you go. I hope you enjoy it. Olga Rocha.
Just the product of some bad seeds.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I was hoping you could talk about what you do day to day, and then maybe we can talk about how the listeners can benefit from your story and your expertise.
Sure. So for me, day to day is a little different than the typical 9 to 5, for sure. So I meet with various types of individuals who are looking for their vocation in life. So it's not so much looking for that one job, but it's looking for what they feel their purpose is in life. Specifically with people that have a disability. That's the population that I work with.
So is that any type of disability, or are there specific types of disabilities?
It's all types. It could be physical, mental, and even going into substance dependency. So it really just comes down to what is it that I can do now and at this stage of my life. Mm-hmm. We all have a purpose. And for some of us, it takes a little while to know what that is, especially if we're going at it alone. Mm-hmm. And me as a vocational counselor, being able to help people determine what that is, or at least help them with the path, makes such a huge difference.
Absolutely. One of the things I've talked about a little bit on this podcast And you and I have crossed paths professionally and had a chance to work on some cases together. But, growing up in this country, it's almost as if there's this idea that when we turn 18 and graduate from high school, that we should know what we're going to do with the rest of our lives. And that just kind of drives me crazy. Because as a kid, I thought something was wrong with me because I didn't know. And I know a lot of young men go through that. They feel like if they don't know what they're going to do with their life, that there's something wrong with them. Right?
I believe, yeah, it is. I believe that there's a very small percentage of people that know exactly what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very minute. And that, for a teenager to think so far ahead, it's so uncommon. So to have that pressure on a child, I think, many times parents are just want to know what their kid is going to do or pick a college or pick some sort of field. And at 18 years old, there's just so much else that needs to be learned. Mm-hmm. Just being independent as it is, let alone this career path, this trajectory for work is just, sometimes it's unrealistic. Yeah. And those pressures, I've seen those added pressures on people develop into something else. And that's where I've been working lately, is individuals with substance abuse treatment, because they've had to rush through something, or they failed to take some time out for themselves, or they've maybe responded to their environment the best way that they could, and they overlooked certain growth, I think.
Well, a significant part of my story being a recovering guy is that, I didn't really develop my voice as a kid. And, when it came time as a teenager and an emerging adult to say, oh, well, I want to do this. And then the louder voices around me said, no, you shouldn't do that. You should do this because it's more stable, or, you can count on this or whatever. And I had a deficiency in self-esteem. So I just kind of, I don't want to disappoint the people around me. And I don't have the confidence to just say, screw it, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I just kind of acquiesced. And then a few years go by and, I'm a mess because I didn't follow my own path. And I wasn't true to myself. And, I paid for it emotionally.
I think when one of the most important aspects of what I do in terms of vocational counseling is really looking at what the person likes, their interest, what they find enjoyment in. Because as we all know, that going to work is work. It's something, it's a responsibility. But when it's a responsibility and something that you don't enjoy or like, or doesn't come natural to you, it's just so much harder. And that's where we get all this work turnover and burnout, and people lose interest in working. I mean, I personally think work is a beautiful thing. I've been working for a very long time, and I think there's so much to say when you see someone so happy with what they're doing, regardless if they're a secretary or they're an engineer or a therapist, but that's what they like. Mm-hmm. That's their purpose. It's interesting you brought up your story. one of my most memorable clients that I had was an individual. He had been using substances for a very long time, and everyone just pretty much pushed him aside and told him what he had to do, and very abusive verbally. So he just settled.
Mm-hmm.
And he settled in an apprenticeship, a very low skill level, for about 20 years while he was in and out of rehab and in and out of jail. And he just came to me not too long ago. And you could tell he just didn't know what to expect. And he already, I mean, the first thing he said, listen, I'm here because I have to,
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see what I'm capable of. I want to see if maybe there's just something out there, maybe. And I said, okay, let's do this. Let's figure it out and work together. So when we finished up, he actually had the highest IQ level that I've ever tested.
Wow.
And he had just phenomenal skill levels. And he was just such a bright individual, but so many people weren't accepting of who he was and trying to mold him into what they wanted, that they overlooked what he had. And I remember having the conversation with him, and because I just had to talk to him, I had to tell him what had happened, the results, and he was floored. But you could hear that, just that smile.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking over the phone, and I could just tell that he was just so excited, and his self-perception just changed in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I said to him, I said, for so long you've been working under someone, but you can be the supervisor, like you can be so much more, and you had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really good experience, and that's why every day is so different for me. I don't know who I'm going to meet or what circumstance someone may be facing. It's just all very different.
Mm-hmm. So how is it you came to do this?
I came to doing this. I actually was a very small percentage that before I was 18, I knew that I wanted to be in the counseling profession. I didn't know specifically in what area, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to go all the way, which is at the doctorate level.
Mm-hmm.
So once I graduated high school, I took a year off because I had that self-doubt. I doubted that I could do it. I know I wanted it, but I didn't know if I was able to.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a year off, and I hated, I don't use hate very much, but I hated just working just to work.
Mm-hmm.
I just was not excited with what I was doing, and it was just every day was the same thing, and I just didn't like it. So I ended up going back to school, and just throughout the years, it just changed. I went from a rehabilitation counselor where I was working in clinics to just about becoming a play therapist. So I worked with children that experienced trauma for a long time. But it just didn't seem like the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started working with individuals that had severe disabilities. And the first place that I actually started was working with the visually impaired. And it just changed my whole perspective on everything. And then I ended up changing my academic trajectory into rehabilitation counseling, which most people get confused, but it's not substance abuse specifically. It's just rehabilitating anyone to being their best.
Right.
Is how I explain it. It's like, you get injured, but you want to be your best. You want to go do something at your, that will work at your optimal level. How can you use this thing? I don't express it as a disability when I meet with someone. I say, this thing. This thing that's out there that everyone keeps telling you about and that you have, how can we use that to be better? And so then I started going into doing assessments, vocational assessments for a long time. And I worked with the state, with the government, and then I ended up going into the court system. So I do a lot of work with the courts and people who actually aren't able to because it's just that severe. And that just brings a whole different appreciation for just life. I mean, me personally, I think there's good days and bad days when I work with someone. There's situations that it's just that severe that it wouldn't be safe for them to work. And those actually have to be the hardest cases, I think, because they want to work so bad and they want to give to society. And it's just so upsetting to them that they can't do something. And, being able to look at, if you can't work, can you volunteer? Can you give back to society in a different way? So really, I preface on looking at the strengths in people. I think society hardens people by looking at their deficits and not really appreciating what they do have, their qualities. So I guess, with that, it makes work not work for me. I love what I do. I feel like I'm at a point where I'm passionate about it. And it just doesn't feel like that rigid day-to-day experience. It's very fulfilling.
Well, it's like I really wanted to do this podcast, and it wasn't like it was going to be a way to make a living or maybe someday down the road. But, I sat here this afternoon, I had a couple hours and I started playing around and editing sound for a different episode that I'm working on. And then the next thing you know, I'm almost late to call you because it just doesn't feel like work. It's just something that it's almost like I wish I had more time to do it. Sometimes it feels like work, but I just become completely enthralled in it when I'm doing it, and I think we all deserve to have something like that,
we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the things that crossed my mind as I'm listening to you is, in addition to this idea that we're all supposed to know we're 18, which is just ridiculous, there is this underlying belief from which, as a culture, we operate that states that you have to choose between happiness and stability, or security. And it's just not true, and this expression, well, that's what makes it a job. Well, kinda, but we're talking about.
Well, this is true. This is true. There's a big difference between a job and a vocation.
Right. Right.
And, my faith has played a large role in all of this as well, because we all I believe obviously in a higher power, and I feel that God has gifted us something.
Mm-hmm.
And that, what is that purpose? I think I feel that just like that 18-year-old is questioning, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
Is something that's very common that individuals go through during different stages of development in their life.
Mm-hmm.
As in their 30s, it's very different from your 40s to you're about to retire. So now you're going to retire, but you don't want to do that job or that work anymore. You actually want to go for that new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I met someone the other day, and she's much older, and she's about to retire. And she said, I have worked, and I felt like, she goes, and it was just work. My whole life up to now has been work. She goes, and I'm finally about to do what my purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is much older, so I did an interest test with her. She had an idea of what it was, but not until we did this assessment and we discussed it and went over it that she said, wow, this confirms it. This is on point as to why I want to do this and why I've been wanting to do this for so long. And she's thrilled. She is so excited. So when we sit here and we impose these things on teenagers, it's just it's so disheartening. And then to just that added pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I think in any situation when we pressure somebody, there's less desire to do it. There's more confusion. I think overall health can just be affected.
Well, and it's as simple as I was talking to someone about this recently. If you think about how you feel when you're doing something you want to do versus how you feel when you're doing something you have to do or you may not want to do, and your energy level, it's just completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And then if we make a conscious decision to live that way, in a way that I'm not really all that jazzed about how I'm spending literally 1/3 of my life, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
No.
Yeah. And that's something that hit me, I guess, probably in my mid-30s. I started to think, is this really how I want to be spending my time?
Well, and that is the biggest, for me, the biggest commodity is time.
Yeah.
How you spend it, how you give it. That's that thing that you just can't get back. You can't change it. It's gone when it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so when I'm meeting with people and I'm speaking to them, I do start that way. It is very casual with me, which is something that's important, because we're talking some serious things here. We're talking about going to work or going to school, changing your career because of an accident that you just went through or some sort of disability that you just got 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you going to do now? So I really expressed it that way. I said, what is it that you like to do?
Mm-hmm. Forget
what everybody else says. What is important to you? And it just changes the whole dynamic of the relationship I have. The therapeutic alliance is so different because it gets real.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, especially in my profession, for a therapist to bring it down to a level where you can understand it, where it makes sense and it's relevant to what's going on around you and what you're going through. It's just very different.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind is, on several of the occasions that I've had to talk to young men about meeting with you, it almost immediately goes straight to, well, I don't know if I want to change jobs right now. I don't know that that's really what I want to do. I'm doing fine. I always go to, well, that's kind of irrelevant. This isn't really about, at least in these situations, this isn't about you changing jobs right now. And you don't have to take this information and react to it. This is about you learning about yourself.
Yeah, it's a discovery process. It's just being able to discover more about who you are. What, people sometimes overlook values that they have when it comes to work. And we all have them. We don't know exactly what that is. We don't think about it, but what is that value? Is it your time freedom? Is it helping others? Is it protection or physical abilities? And it's so interesting, the guys that you're referring to, I remember doing this value assessment with them. They were telling me all these values, and I said, all right, let's bring it down to 4. Let's narrow it down. And they narrowed it down. I said, okay, so where are you working? And it was just completely it did not match up.
Right.
I said, it's not matching up, but let's just go with it. Let's just keep going with it. And that's when they start laughing. And it's just laughing because it's like, wow, I really need to learn more about myself.
Right.
And, it really is a discovery process. So let's say you don't want to change right now. You're not too sure about it. You're uncertain about it. But to be able to have something that you can reference to when you are ready, it just offers that encouragement. It gives a little bit more encouragement to go and do that, whatever that is for you. And this is a big turning point in many people's life. It's huge turning point with, wow, I'm really going to go to school. How do I do that? What do I do? How am I going to pay for it? And, those questions come up, and I say, okay, we're going to work through this, and we're going to figure it out, and let's just keep going to the next thing, the next thing in front of us. Let's not get over what we're doing here, and just kind of stay in the present, and that helps.
Yeah. And, one of the other things that I've seen is guys come away from this process with you. I'm thinking of one guy in particular who was, doing some kind of skilled trade, or that was the apex of his professional life, to this point. And, he does all this testing with you and you tell him, he really would make a great attorney. And he just never thought of himself that way.
He didn't.
He just always thought of himself as, I'm going to basically be a blue collar guy. And to me that it just, I was talking to someone earlier today about how it's so, at least for me and my experience in life where I come from, it's so much easier for me to impose limitations upon myself. That my scope of what's possible, I limit, but when you have somebody shine a light on you like that and say, no, you could be really great at this.
Well, it's affirming it. And I speak, I know the guy you're talking about. And I remember just speaking so much truth into him and saying, you are talented. You are very smart. You have such a desire to do this type of work. You really do, but you're scared. And you're just not sure. So you rather just settle. But the truth is, you think it's easy what you're doing now, but when you love what you do and it's your purpose, it's going to be even easier because you enjoy it.
Well, and on a spiritual level, what I have come to learn personally is that when I'm in alignment with my purpose, whatever that is at the time being, then everything kind of falls into place.
Oh, it does. It's amazing.
It's not a
connection. No, it's not. And I say that to myself sometimes. I say, wow, the struggle's real. Like right now, the struggle is real. And then I stop my sentence and I just start laughing. I'm like, no, it's not. You love what you're doing. You're perfectly fine.
Right.
And, but it is when you're in alignment, with who you are and what you feel you should be doing, more about yourself or you're just trying out this new discovery you've made. Things just start to piece themselves together somehow. And it's amazing. The connections you make, the people you run into, your self-esteem, just all of it, even your work turnover just changes.
Well, and we have this belief, I think, that, if I'm going to do what I want to do, then I will have to struggle to survive. I mean, I hear that from people all the time. Well, this job, I make a really nice living. It's not really what I want to be doing, but I'm really, really good at it. And if I was to do this, man, that would be, I don't know how I would make ends meet. When the truth is, spiritually, it'll all work out. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, it'll all work out.
So in a situation like that, because I've had those come up, I say, okay, well, you obviously really would like to do that and it's something you enjoy. So an example would be this very high-skilled, semi-skilled work. The person really wants to go into some sort of art form, or just something like they love animals. So they would just want to work with animals. And I say, well, why do we have to make a decision for either or right now? Why can't we do both? And that just, you see like their face just lighten up. It's like, all right, I guess I'll do both. I'm like, yeah, let's just try it out. Like, let's do both for a little bit and then see what happens. And that also helps with the whole transition and work is changing careers, whether it's based on an injury or a disability that you've had your whole life, you know, any transition is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. It's something new. But when you start getting into the transition into employment, the transition into academia, it's going to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the things that I assess too is the support system.
Mm-hmm.
And the value of a support system. And many people that I've come across don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to look at, you know, different things that they could do to develop that,
mm-hmm.
Because it's hard. Change is hard.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things about, I'm a big believer that we really ourselves have all the answers, you know, and the jobs
Mm-hmm.
of people like you and I, or people in the helping professions, is to help people discover themselves, because they already have them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I say to them when I say to my clients when they come in, I mean, I draw this picture out for them. Many times they have no idea why they're coming to see me. Why are they doing this? Or, you know, and the ones that do know are so excited. Like, I met a girl last week and she was just so thrilled to meet me and to talk and to see her results and to know what's going to happen next. And just, it's amazing. So I just keep on with the encouragement and it's great. But then the ones that just are unsure, I draw this funnel. I said, okay, well, we're starting at the top right now. And as we go through this process and we develop a relationship, a therapeutic relationship, we're going to narrow things down a little bit more, where then you can start working on making a clear decision as to what you think it's for you, not what anybody else says, but what you think is for you. And that really helps things out a little bit more. I'm a big fan of illustrating things,
mm-hmm.
and it helps. It really does, because this is a form of counseling. What I do,
Mm-hmm.
It's just different,
Mm-hmm.
and many people don't know about it. It's not a big field, but it's certainly one that is sought under some pretty serious and dire circumstances. Reminds me of this young girl I just met not too long ago. She was studying to be a nurse, and very bright, very smart, so outgoing, just a beautiful person. And she wasn't able to get places because she woke up with some sort of condition that left her paralyzed from her shoulders down, and some nerve issues, obviously. But that happened in 3 months to her.
Mm-hmm.
So she went from being a great student, about to be a nurse, to now she feels like she needs a nurse. And it was very hard. But being able to look at her and say, okay, well, what was so important to you about nursing? Like, why were you so just wanting that field? And she said, I really value helping people. Just want to help people. And I really just want to be with people all the time. And I have a lot to offer. I just don't know how I can do that now. We figured out a few things, and at the end she goes, I think I want to do what you do. I said, that's amazing because we need more people to do what I do. So this is awesome. And so I'm going to be meeting with her quite frequently. But so it went from just all this uncertainty and just I walk in and it's a very sad situation. And leaving, there's hope. So it makes a difference.
Well, I think that's an example of, something that crossed my mind early in this conversation and that certainly applies to me is that often the purpose or the meaning that we're looking for, we find in our wounds. For me, it was alcoholism. And then, I never would have guessed. I had this idea as a kid when I was like a teenager that in the back of my mind, I wanted to help people somehow. But I would have never come up with the idea to do what I do now. Unless, I suffered through that. And it led me to where I needed to be, among the people I needed to be among, and the opportunities unfolded, and which I think for me is another thing I wanted to touch on. I know people like you, not many, but people like you who just knew what they wanted to do. There aren't that many of them. And but what I've learned, I shamed myself for so long for not knowing until I realized, I'm kind of an intuitive person and I feel my way through things and I know where I belong if I'm really in tune, and I know when to stay and when to go if I really listen to that internal voice. And that's just kind of how I live life. And it's okay. And it actually works out pretty well. And there's nothing to feel bad about. That's just, that's just how I am. And also, I don't know. I'm sure you could tell me how often on average a person changes jobs or careers in their adult life in our country. How often would that be?
I would say on average about 2 to 3 times.
Okay. So now I did this little thing on Facebook a few years ago where I thought, I'm going to write out every job I've ever performed in my life, starting from shoveling snow, raking leaves, mowing grass, and to what I'm doing now. And it was a pretty long list. I've always worked. And, it really adds to the flavor of my life. I've done a lot of different stuff, like I drove a stinking Zamboni.
I just hearing you, it reminds me of, so I was talking to my mom the other day, and she's awesome at reminding me of what I accomplish, and I like to say my persistence and tenacity. And she told me about this job that I had when I was younger, and from an observer's point of view. And I came home. I said, Mom, they're selling these things and people are, it's a good way to make money. And I really want to do it. I think this is going to be amazing. And I think I was 12 or 13 years old. So that in itself is just such an extreme. And I just never looked at it as a bad thing. I always enjoyed it. You know, I've had various types of work, a lot of unskilled work, cleaning and working as cashiers, working at restaurants, which I was terrible at. I would drop food all the time. So I knew just process of elimination, what I should not be involved in when it came to work. And, you know, it's just something that I can say that I'm very proud of, because I'll try it. I'll try it out. I try to stay willing and open and being able to express that to people by just saying, you know, I did it. Right. So why not try it? What's the worst that could happen? You know, let's just try it out and see where we go from there.
Well, one thing I, for me, you know, the other part of this is the people we meet at the jobs that we have. And, you know, cause sometimes it's not the job. Sometimes it's the people and the way I express that to clients a lot of times is every job I've ever had always led to the next job.
It does, but it's not, you know, just how I view life, it all has a purpose. Mm-hmm. Whether it was a bad experience or a great experience or a loss or a gain in your life, there is something from that that we could learn from, that we can say, wow, that really sucks. but this is what I have now.
Yeah.
Or this is what I learned now. And I mean, I have to, even when I'm speaking with my clients, I have to bring it down to that level, because we're dealing with people that have severe injuries from work, or even when I worked with the vets that were coming from Iraq and Iran, you know, how are they going from overseas and doing all these amazing things for our country, and now they need to transition to civilian life. Mm. And that's so scary for them. So being able to look into those things a little bit more and say, you know, what if anything can you see right now from that experience? And we talk a lot. Mm. There's a lot of conversation involved, and you know, there's I think it's a choice. How you perceive things, mm-hmm. that's your choice, because there will be a good and there will be a bad. Mm-hmm. That's how, what I've learned from just life, the people that I meet, and my own personal experiences. And I can say for a fact, I learn from every client that I've ever had. Mm-hmm. Something, you know, a lot of times it's just a greater appreciation for life. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's where it becomes much more rewarding for me. Mm.
So it's almost 2020. And, you know, one of the things about this show, I mean, I'm a big believer that if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, then not only are we happier, but the world's a better place. And I've always wanted this show to kind of be a resource to the person who maybe wants to make that change, but doesn't have the wherewithal to do it yet, or just needs that nudge or encouragement or whatever, or the validation that what you want is worthwhile, you know? So going into the new year, you know, what do you say to that person who has a good job, but they're unfulfilled and they want to do, what's the first step for that person?
I would say, is that the best way to use your time? Is that really what you would think at the end of the day is going to bring you satisfaction? And satisfaction is different for everybody, you know, but why not try? Maybe not at an extreme level, but perhaps at something much smaller, like just volunteer. You know, like if you like art, why not get involved in art? Don't leave your job, but why not go after something that you really enjoy? Maybe start off like in your free time and go from there. That's the first thing that comes to my mind would be that. Well,
and I've learned, you know, this is, I guess I've been through these things a few times in my life. You know, the first big one was baseball, because I really loved baseball as a kid more than anything. My first real love. And I had in my head as a little kid that I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. And, you know, I had parents who told me, you know, if you work hard and you practice, you can do anything you want. So I had in my head, well, I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player. And I talked about this in one of the other episodes. I had this teacher, you know, who was like the cool teacher, and, you know, we all looked up to him, and one day we were having this conversation about what we were all going to be when we grew up. And I said I was going to be a Major League Baseball player, like with conviction, you know, and he was like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean? And he'd never seen me play baseball. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm going to work really hard. And he's like, it's 1 in a million, Tom, you know? Like, he really took the wind out of my sails. Now, if I was a different kind of kid, I might have said, well, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. And I didn't listen to him right away, but I made a middle note, you know, I didn't forget. And so when it came time, it was a lot easier for me to like just walk away and say to myself, well, I'm not going to be a Major League Baseball player anyway. I'm not going to play shortstop for the Chicago Cubs. So why should I keep playing, you know? And, now that probably was true. You know, I probably wouldn't have made the major leagues or even the minor leagues. Maybe, I don't know. I could have played college baseball somewhere, but what I know now that I didn't know then is if I'd have kept playing baseball, I may have never played Major League Baseball, but I may have been a coach, or I may have been a scout, or I may have been a groundskeeper. And I may have been happy doing that because I loved the atmosphere so much. And another time in life, it was around writing, because I've always been a pretty proficient writer, and I've written for some newspapers, and I've always kind of had a knack for it. And so when it came time to graduate from high school, I want to be a writer. Well, what are you going to do? Flip burgers at McDonald's so you can write? You know, it's not either you write the great American novel or you don't write at all. I mean, there's a lot of in between.
Well, there is so much in between. And I think it's like we get in this rut of it's black or white. Mm-hmm. It either is or it's not. And when it comes to that and being able to pursue something in what you enjoy, that's the gray.
Right.
So for me, it was, I love to cook. I really enjoy cooking. It's something that I've done. I mean, I was taught at a very young age to cook. I probably shouldn't have been handling a stove at that age, but I just loved it so much. But I knew there was no way I was going to be a chef. I couldn't do it. Like I just could not at that level. I just knew that it just wasn't going to happen. So instead, I just cook all the time now. I invite people over. I host. Because I know that is something that I really, really enjoy. So why would I give it up?
Right.
And writing was one of those things for me as well. Like, I didn't even realize we had that in common, but I still write every day. That's how I start my day, is writing, because I didn't want to give it up. I feel like when we give up things like that, positive things, we're not acknowledging something about us. Mm-hmm. We're overlooking something that could really bring us satisfaction, especially in those times where we're in that quote unquote job. Mm-hmm. So we go to that job and we come home, and some people bring home that job, the bad experience, the bad day, and it takes away from your family, takes away from the joy that you could have. It just transfers into so many different areas. So I really try to emphasize, and, if you're not ready to make that huge step, what's a little step? It could be the smallest step, but what is that little step that you can do?
I've thought a couple times in this conversation. I had a client at one point. He was an Italian kid, and he says to me one day, I really think I'd like to be a yogi. Oh yeah? Yeah. Well, what makes you think that? I don't know. I just think I'd really like to do that. And I said, well, how often do you meditate? He said, oh, I don't meditate. Why don't you start with that? Why don't we
take baby steps first?
Right. Yeah.
I a couple of times, people would just want to go to the extreme. I'm like, well, do you really think you're going to win a marathon if you don't practice? Like, if you don't implement something, like do something, like you can't just go out there and I think that's where a lot of that sense of failure comes in, because you're not starting off with a realistic expectation. Mm-hmm. It's so unrealistic. So I try to take those baby steps.
Yeah.
And I try not to look at more than a year or two when I'm working with my clients, because it's so overwhelming. I mean, even
so
that
much can
is
happen
hard.
in a year.
So much can happen, but and I say that because of academic programs of colleges. What is it that we can look at if we have to go this route of looking at 2 years? Like, let's think small, and then we'll grow as time goes on. And a lot of my clients, I'll see them yearly, just to especially if they're in school. Mm-hmm. And then there's times with that they need training to go to work. So that could be weekly. Mm-hmm. It all depends. We're all in different stages of life. And that's what I think we need to look at independently. Mm-hmm. Like, where I'm at is where I'm at. It's not, I can't compare myself to somebody else because it just won't work out. Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that I think is a shame is that there are a lot of times when, and I say, talk to clients about talking to you. I say you because, like you said, there aren't many of you. You're the only one I know. And I know a lot of people in the helping profession, as you know, but, like I'm a particular guy who I'm working with comes to mind who is he's in a transitional place in his life, and he needs to decide what he's going to do instead of what he shouldn't do. And he knows he shouldn't do. That's kind of where he's at. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned to him meeting with you, and this comes up a lot. I mean, people see it as kind of a luxury, which it's kind of a shame that first of all, people don't know resources like this exist. And then a lot of times when you mention it to them, it's like, well, I don't really want to spend the money on that. When in truth, it could really enhance the quality of your life in a major way.
Oh, so much. So much. I've met people that have gone to colleges, expensive colleges, universities for just 4 or 6 years, and then they finish and they are not happy whatsoever. Mm-hmm. They can't find a job or work in that field that they chose, and it could all have been just looked at and reviewed with what I do. Mm-hmm. We look at what the labor market is and is expected to be. We look at the wages, earning capacities. Then we look at, as simple as that doesn't cover your values. Mm-hmm. Your work values don't align with what you're saying you want to do. You want to be a lawyer, but it does not come up. Mm-hmm. And I think, that helps. And it's in the outcome of what I do that it makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's when it makes sense. So, I highly encourage people that are looking for a new direction in their life and want to find out what that vocation is for them, and they just haven't been able to do it, that they do this. Mm-hmm. That they really, really do this. I mean, I had a mom call me not too long ago, and she is retired from the Marines. And she said, upon my retirement, they made me go through job readiness and this vocational evaluation and all these different things. And she said, and they came up with me being a pilot. I said, really? She's like, yeah, I would have never thought it. She goes, and then they said I should move here because the economy is so good, and this is where I'm going to find more, more work availability, and it's great. She's like, and they were so spot on. She's like, it's amazing. And then she goes, this is why I want my son to do this. Mm. And I said, well, so I just, I said, okay, I understand you're saying that, but what has really, really led you to encourage your sons to do this? And she goes, well, and this is when humor comes in. I try to really bring a lot of humor in all of this. She goes, well, the fact that he told me he wants to be a scuba diver and then he wants to teach people how to jump out of planes, I'm really concerned because he's not a good swimmer. I said, that makes complete sense. I don't think that might not be good. And she goes, in health reasons, he shouldn't be doing anything jumping out of a plane that has to do with jumping out of a plane. So I mean, it really goes that extreme where people just don't know, and they're just going to grab at whatever looks appealing, or seems easy, or seems lucrative. But that's not the case.
Well, and
For
they're being
them.
just kind of, they're not being intentional. They're just kind of flying in the wind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's where meeting with me really helped. And we might not narrow it down exactly to a pinpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay, because that's just not where the person is at that moment in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Here's some options. Here's some ideas. Let's really think about these ideas. How can you engage in these areas that you like to see if it really is something that is worth pursuing for you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many that they just can't pick. So I said, you know what? I think that there's no harm in trying it out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try it out. And I think it sounds like that's what you and I did with the work that we did growing up and even into adulthood now. We just try it.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see how this is going to work out. And sometimes it just isn't the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
But again, just because it wasn't a right fit doesn't mean that it wasn't a learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, back to values, I mean, there are all sorts of factors. Like a major factor is for me is, I'm a dad, and it's since I've been a dad, what's been most important to me is that whatever I'm doing, it affords me the most time with my son that I can possibly get, because I've seen too many young men whose dads had the, golden ticket jobs where they made all kinds of money, but they were never there. And I never wanted to do that. I see the value, because when you're a little kid, all you really want is your mom and dad. You want time with them. And so that's been my priority at this point in my life. And, soon, that will not always be the priority. And it wasn't always the priority in my life. And we do change. But
and then I think that that's where we go through just life space. It's just the development of your life, and where does your work, occupation, vocation align with that?
right.
See, one of the biggest requirements, I say requirements, when it came to, okay, what is it that I really, really want to do? Do I really, really want to do this? And I was questioning myself, that 1 year out of high school, I was questioning myself, like, do I really want to do this? Like, this is going to be intense. I'm going to be in school for ever. So I really want to do this. And the one value that came up, and it's the most important thing to me, is my family.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to be available for my family?
Mm-hmm.
What will give me that extra time and a little bit more of that convenience of, somebody needs this. Okay, let me go. I can manipulate things a little bit easier because I have my practice, and then I'm going to go do this and have my time be with my family.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody's is different.
Right.
And so for me, I see where you're at when you're saying that with your son. That's just, I guess, where we're at now.
Yeah. 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 Well, there's this other thing in our culture that I just think is really unfortunate. And that's, in relation to this, there's so much lack of fulfillment. And then what happens to that person who's unfulfilled? That comes out in some other way. And there, that dissatisfaction, that general dissatisfaction with life because I'm not who I want to be. I mean, I think that's just pervasive in our culture. And, I just think this to me is such an important topic, doing what I do for a living. I mean, I've been doing it a long time, and I've learned, well, if you're going to be clean and sober, it helps to have something to be clean and sober for, first of all, and also, like, if you're going to do this, this is the time to be the person who you want to be. You deserve to live the life that you want to live. So let's do it. Let's figure out what's going to make you happy. Let's start from there, and let's start working on it now so that you can be who you want to be. And really, that's, like I mentioned before, that's really what this show is all about, because, I've had a hard time with that in my life. And that's really where the motivation came from, to, like, I want to help other people and give them the support that I needed until I could figure out where I was supposed to go. And these concerns, like the self-doubt around career and vocation, and I mean, it's painful stuff if we carry that around all the time. And I just want to help alleviate that with people as much as I can. And Olga, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's been a blast, and I definitely want to talk more. I want to hear more about the writing stuff.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was so good speaking to you.
All right, well, have a happy new year.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Path to Authenticity. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can find links in the show notes or visit our website at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, if you have a suggestion for a topic, or you know someone who would make a great guest, email the show at thepathtooauthenticity@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show, or even just a particular episode, please share it with them. Every little bit helps. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one wherever it is you choose to listen. You can find the show on Patreon, where by becoming a patron, you can hear episodes before they're released publicly. You can gain access to supplemental content. There are other benefits in the various tiers. Visit patreon.com/thepathtooauthenticity. Join our Facebook community or follow the show on Instagram, both at The Path to Authenticity. We also have a YouTube channel. You can connect with us on Twitter or Pinterest. To hear the songs from this and every episode, you can find the Path to Authenticity playlist on Spotify. Obviously, there are a lot of ways you could be spending your time, so I appreciate you spending some of it here with me. I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening. Be nice. The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.